Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast with Kevin and Chuck. Today we're going to talk about something called 10%, or it's actually called the 90% rule. And I guess what it is 10% of the work gets you 90% of the results. And what happens, I think, with prepping is it all does seem overwhelming. There is a million challenges, a million things out there to worry about. You can't really be prepared for everything. But the way it kind of works is it turns out there's just a few things in every category that seem to really get you the results. That get you the meat. Just having the basics seem to take you further than, running around kind of haphazard trying to get everything. People always, oh, look, I got the Bud K catalog and I see the little survival chain with a rope on it or something, or the knife or the little bracelet with paracord and, oh, look, I'm doing my prepper part. That's not really what prepping is. I mean, there's a place for paracord and it can be really useful and that kind of thing. But there's certain things that actually get you real results where you can make minimal effort and get something, done with a real yield. One of the examples I've heard is like a boxer. When a professional boxer goes into a fight, if he hasn't really been able to study or deal with his opponent in a long time, they end up doing that first couple of rounds where they just kind of dance around and feel each other out. You kind of feel out somebody's capability, kind of where they're at physically, how aggressive they are, that kind of thing, before you come up with your plan of attack. And that's the idea, I think, with, most things we approach, projects, prepping, going to college, anything you do, you kind of want to take it in and say, all right, what really is the goal here? What am I looking to accomplish? And what are the steps that are going to get me the biggest results? And I think that's a great way to approach prepping and put your, organization and everything in order, is to kind of look at a bigger picture and then see where you can really get more bang for your buck. So Kevin, where would you even start with something like that?
I think you got to start with your basic needs. Food and water, shelter, just the basics. What I think about when I think about prepping, when I think about the basics, the things do I want to get started with? One is do I have enough food and water for 2 weeks? We talk about doing 2 weeks of food, and that's easy enough to do. You can start stockpiling, just buying cans of canned food. You can get boxed food, dried foods, rice, pasta, things like that. And you can even read your pantry, just go in there and dig through and find the canned stuff, find the stuff that's going to last a while and set it aside. It's not something you have to go out to the store and spend a whole bunch of money right off the bat. One of the things that's a little bit more difficult is water, because people think of water as you have to have enough to drink. And that's a good place to start. But, you also have to wash your hands. You want to be able to flush toilets. You want to be able to clean things, your dishes, that sort of stuff. So water is a little bit more you have to have a little bit more set aside than what you might commonly think. A lot of people say, "Oh, a gallon a day per person," and get 10 gallons worth of water, and they're good for 10 days. But that water goes a lot faster if you're using it like you normally use water in your house. It's so easy to turn on the tap and hot water comes out. Cold water comes out, and you're all set. We're kind of spoiled by that. I'm not complaining about it, but when that's gone, you're going to have a lot more use for water than just drinking. And I think that's something to think about. The other thing that I want to point out before we get too far is the shelter we are talking about. A lot of us live in places that get cold during the winter. You want to have a way to heat your house if the electricity's out. A lot of us have furnaces, electric heat, all that sort of stuff is great. But when the power goes out, do you have a backup plan? Even one of those little camp stoves that you can get with a little propane tank, that's better than nothing. If you have to start somewhere, don't go out and spend thousands of dollars on a wood stove and spend money you don't have for getting things set up for something like that. Start basic and start simple, and get stuff that you can use for more than one thing. Like a camp stove is great for that. You can take it out camping, but also, you can warm up some coffee on a cold day when the power is not working, and that makes a big difference. So what I'd like you to do when you're doing planning out these preps and you're just getting started is don't go out and spend thousands of dollars and buy all the latest gadgets and all the cool shit that you can find. Start with the basics and start with stuff that you're going to use one way or another, whether or not you come into an emergency or not, and just start setting things aside for an emergency situation.
Now, I think that's right. You really need to, just start to plan with baby steps. You just kind of ease into it, but putting a little thought in, I think, makes the things go in the right direction, I guess. What are the little supplies that are going to last on the shelf, when you're doing it? Or how can I do a cheap, easy, recurring water or set water aside? Something like the water bob, right? We talked about that, throwing that in the bathtub. Bam, I can get all this water right away. Now, if your water goes out all of a sudden and it just stops coming out of the faucet, you're kind of screwed with that. It's not really going to help you. But if you live in a town with a big water tower or something, or the water treatment's up on the hill, the pump's shut down, you're still going to have some water coming out of those pipes. And that's a big thing, that you're able to, you could fill it up and kind of get ahead of everybody else. And, you want to be careful not to be wasteful. You don't want to be the guy grabbing all the water while your neighbors are getting screwed because you took it all. But just the same, it is your job to take care of your family and your own, and having a plan to do that is definitely a smart, direction ahead.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I used to talk about all the time, and I haven't mentioned it in a while, but it bears repeating: batteries. Inventory your batteries. How many batteries do you have? Get more batteries. Whatever you've got, it's not enough. So many stuff runs off of batteries that you don't think about until you need to use it. You go into the lights go out, you go to the drawer, you pull out your flashlight, and it doesn't come on. It's been sitting in there for 2 years and the batteries are dead, or you left it on the last time you put it away, or your kid took it out to play flashlight tag and left it on and stuck it in the drawer and closed the drawer and it's dead. I have a big, box that I keep all my batteries in. D batteries, C batteries, A batteries, triple A batteries. There's no such thing as A batteries, double A batteries, and triple A batteries.
Yeah.
But that's all right. It's important to have the variety of the different types. You don't want to pull out the flashlight and realize it uses triple A's and not double A's, and now you're fucked. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on that. You're going to, the power's out, spend 3 days. You don't know what's happening. Your phone's dead. But you've got that old radio in the garage, that takes the C batteries, and you can go set it up and get that radio going and figure out what the hell's going on in your neighborhood. Things like that are really a great way to not spend a lot of money, but also have a backup plan.
Yeah, I mean, I know I put together a quick Faraday cage, and that's where a lot of the really good preps. Now, I mean, to be honest, there's probably $200 in there, and again, probably not the starting point. But man, if there was an EMP or something like that, that's I actually have some more stuff in there beyond the $200. But at a $200 limit, you could have a couple of battery, solar chargers, a bunch of, like end loop quality rechargeable batteries that, are really going to last. I have CR123A batteries that are rechargeable. I have, like a crank radio. I actually have a couple sets of Motorola that talk about, radios, because communications are huge, in a situation, and stuff like that. Just putting it all together, closing it up in a legitimate Faraday cage that's going to work. We've done episodes on that. If you guys are curious, I'm sure YouTube's full of it too. Actually, I think we have some on our YouTube channel at the Prepping Badass channel. But you throw that stuff and you can actually see some of the things I put in there too. But then you have the go-to stuff that's going to be a game changer. $200 worth of electronics. No, that's not all the electronics I use in a normal day. But damn, I can change the world. Some of you may even have like old iPods or something that you can load up a bunch of PDFs and throw in there. You probably have like an old iPod that you have in a drawer somewhere or whatever, where you can store all your favorite episodes of the Survival and Basic Badass podcast, right? Throw it in the Faraday cage. But just, and I have some lights and things like that in there. The simpler flashlights, you're not going to need it in a Faraday cage. It won't make a difference. But, things like that you plan for, and it's going to take you light years ahead of everybody else. Now, again, Faraday cage, probably not the first thing I would do when I'm starting to get into prepping, but something of where a couple of things could be a game changer. Being able to, I mean, yeah, if you can have thermal in there or something, you can see at night, or, decent radios, with real range, where instead of having to have runners to go back or, to tell people what's going on, you can have a couple of checkpoints around your community to protect against the crazy riots that came in, and you can communicate, hey, we need more people over here. Hey, this is going on. Or you could have an overwatch. Hey, look, there's a bunch of crazy people coming up at you. Those kind of things. It becomes a game changer, being able to communicate like that. And so a little bit of preparing can take you a long way. People say, oh, well, the probability of that, an EMP or a solar flare, something like that, never going to happen. We don't need to worry about it. Well, you know what, to be honest, the reality of it happening in our lifetime, probably pretty unlikely. But spending $200, and honestly, I can use those things for other stuff if, the need arises. There's a lot of other uses there. But $200 and that set aside can be a real game changer if that's something that you think is a legitimate fear, that you're worried about. And, again, your money can take you as far as you want, but that first $200 is going to put you a light year ahead of other people, whereas $2,000 can, put you ahead of people, but it's not going to take you that much further. That's kind of the point of this episode. It'll, keep you going, but, just getting the basics out of the way, you can really put yourself ahead of the crowd.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is I've got these different battery packs for charging my phone. USB plugins. They're not expensive. I got one that's solar powered. You set it out in the sun and then plug it into your phone, charge your phone right up. I've got a couple other ones that are just, you just plug into the wall and charge up, and then they last, the last 6 months a year. They'll last quite a while, and you're used to plugging in your phone maybe when you go to bed at night, or when you get in your car and drive to work. But after a day or two, your phone's going to be dead. Your phone's going to run out of power real fast if you don't have a place you can plug it in. And having one of those backups is really inexpensive. And a smartphone is really helpful. If you have service and you have power, that's going to make a world of difference in the information that you're able to access in an emergency situation, let alone just calling your mom and checking in on her, that sort of stuff. One of the other things that I think is important to talk about is your medicine cabinet. Now, you can spend thousands of dollars getting all sorts of medications and all sorts of crazy stuff. I had a friend of mine that's from he lived in Yemen. His family's out there, and he went to go take a trip out there a few months ago. And one of the things he did was just went to the drugstore and just raided the over-the-counter medicine they had there. They couldn't even get like things like baby aspirin and stuff like that. We don't have that problem. You might have a problem getting to the drugstore in an emergency situation, but you can stock that stuff up right now. Check it. How much Tylenol do you have left? How much aspirin do you have left? What's your situation with Band-Aids and NyQuil and things like that, the basic medications that can really make a difference in a bad situation like that. I think it's worthwhile to check your medicine cabinet, see what you're low on, and just, keep the stock up. Pick up the stuff before you need it. Don't wait until your kid's sick and then run out to the pharmacy. Have that stuff set aside and prepared. Makes a difference even in that sort of thing. Your kid's running a fever and shit. Now I gotta get in my car and drive out to the pharmacy instead of, sitting here next to him and already have the something to bring their fever down.
$2
having your
$2 on anti-diarrhea medicine can be a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Planning ahead something like that, or to be honest, Benadryl. I at Sam's Club will buy the big $5 pack of Benadryl pills, and that kind of thing. That comes in handy a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Something like Oragel, kind of cool. I use Oragel with the kids with like bee stings. I've pulled stitches out of my kids with Oragel, where I numb it a little bit and then good to go. Things like that can give you a huge advantage, with things that come up, and just having it on hand instead of, oh, that'd be cool right now, but I don't have it. And, damn, with inflation, anything you buy now is an investment, right? Because next week you can sell it for twice, And honestly, a lot of things are really disappearing. People don't. I think you could never imagine in America that we would end up in the world, but where it's funny. I was re-listening to Atlas Shrugged again, and they always talked about like the businesses closing, and you couldn't get a car, you couldn't get a new car because there's no parts. You couldn't get the phone lines couldn't be replaced in an area because there was no new copper wire or whatever, things like that. And it kept becoming more and more of an issue. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a fantasy extreme situation. But now when you go to the car dealer and you're like, hey, I need new heads for my engine. Oh, yeah, look, man, you got to pay for them right now. And it's going to be over a month before they might show up. But really, we have no ETA, and there's like 200 people ahead of you in line, and I don't know what to tell you. Or you can buy some used shit that, I have some garbage here that you can buy that because that's the world we live in now. Well, all right, screw it. I'll just buy a new car. Oh, yeah, we don't have those either.
Can't do that either.
I was talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah. He goes, I went to the car dealer, and I just sold my car, and I had $10,000 cash, and I thought I was king. And I went in, and I was like, yeah, I got 10 grand. What do you got on the used lot? Yeah, we got nothing for you. And then he's like, oh, that guy's trying to rip me off. What a dick. Goes to another dealer, and they're like, yeah, man, I don't want to be rude, but yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. And, my point is, and I know where I work, there's different, our supply chain. Luckily, the company I work for is pretty smart where we actually buy most of our suppliers so that way we can control what's coming in. Whenever the opportunity presents itself, we actually bought a big percentage of 3M when this COVID happened to make sure that we could get masks. I mean, that's how, the way my company thinks, the company I work for. But anyway, that's the kind of thing, though. You really have to worry about where your stuff comes from. And more in this modern age with everything shutting down and nobody willing to work and just the supply chain disruptions everywhere, gas, all these things are weighing in and just kind of crushing from the outside where things aren't available. And you need to kind of think ahead and plan, but you can't run around frantic. You got to, have a plan of attack and get the stuff that's really going to benefit you. Like, what else would you be looking for, Kevin?
Well, I mean, I think that supply chain issue right now is kind of waking everybody up. That's a real issue. And, me personally, I try and do as much of my own stuff as I possibly can. I try and reuse and repurpose stuff. And that's something to keep in mind when you're doing stuff like that. When you can't find something, dig through your basement, dig through your garage, and you can usually find something that'll work temporarily in an emergency situation. But one of the other things that I think is a good idea for beginning preppers is practice your fire starting. A lot of people, I like to have a fire in the fire pit in the back, 2 or 3 times a week. I just, it's one of the things I enjoy doing. I like doing, but a lot of people that live in urban areas and city areas don't have a lot of experience with it. It can be really hard to get a fire started with, if it's been raining for 3 days and you can't find anything dry. It can be really hard to, get a fire started with flint. A lot of people talk about that and, make sure you have your flint, so you can get that, it'll take you 30 minutes or so to get that fire started. Try doing the bow drill, and, there's a couple of ways to get fire with friction. Good luck with that if things are wet. That's not going to happen. If you don't have dry stuff, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
No, I personally like to start up on. Go ahead.
It's not like the movies where you, just slap 2 rocks together and the fire comes on, or maybe rub some sticks. I tie my shoelace on a stick and turn it quick, 2 minutes. And
right.
There's the smoke. Here we go. Blow on it. Good. I'm good. There it goes. Yeah. No, that's not the reality of fire starting.
No, and it almost never works out that way. You're going to be working on that for days if you're trying to, use a bow drill or something like that. Personally, I've got a big stockpile of lighters, cigarette lighters. I've got them in my car. I've got them in a bug out bag. I've got them, every place, because it's a lot easier. And, in my bug out bag, I also keep a small bottle of lighter fluid. The ones you use to fill up Zippo lighters, just because if it's wet, if it's rainy, and you're trying to get a fire started, it's going to be a nightmare with just trying to use a lighter, matches without anything to help you out. It can really be difficult if you're trying to do that in the wet area, So I'd recommend stocking up on a couple of matches, stocking up on some lighters, have some stuff available and ready to use. Now, I just mentioned bug out bags. So let's talk real quick about a basic bug out bag that you can do for, do for a few bucks. I think I've probably got $1,000 invested in my bug out bag, but I'm a retard. I go over the top with stuff. You don't need to spend $1,000 on a bug out bag. What I'd recommend is spending the money on the bag itself, a bag that you can carry that fits you well, that distributes the weight well, and then after that you can just fill it up with the stuff you have around your house. Throw some lighters
Tuna
in there,
fish.
like Ed mentioned. A couple of cans of tuna. Make sure you have a can opener if you have canned stuff in there. No electric can openers. Dry socks, change of underwear and t-shirt. Start there. Start with a couple of granola bars in there. Compass, a map. Start with the basics. You don't have to have a bug out bag that's going to help you survive the apocalypse for the next 6 months. Just something quick you can grab that can, keep you dry, keep you warm, and keep you fed for a little while, So, as far as bug out bags go, I think that's an important part of prepping. A lot of people talk about bug out bags. That's the big sexy thing. Bug out bags, bug out bag. That's all everybody talks about. The truth is, though, you just need something that you can grab and go that has some of your basics in there. Don't stress out about, spending, hundreds and hundreds of dollars and all the lightweight, cool shit. You can work on that later. Just start with the basics, and you can stock that bag as you go. Don't worry about, blowing out all your savings so you can have the top of the line bug out bag and you can survive out of it for the next year.
If you guys want to check out, we actually have a video on the Prepping Badass YouTube channel on doing a 72-hour get home bag, and that's kind of what Kevin's talking about right now. That bag is the bag that is going to get you there. We also have a video where it's like, hey, take the kitchen sink and everything, and you're going to rebuild the world. And that's more not a bag to carry. That's a bag you can carry 2 miles through the woods, but you're not running off whatever. That one was intended to be like, hey, throw this in the back of the truck and get the hell out of town because everything's there and you're ready to go. Definitely two different purposes, and, take it all with a grain of salt as, hey, here's a good starting point. Decide what's right for you. But if it's something you're actually planning on leaving on foot, like Kevin said, having something that fits you properly, distributes the weight evenly, and, is really well planned and packed, that's going to make a big difference and a game changer if you need to get out of somewhere on foot in a hurry. So, something to do. But again, little steps. You pick the right things that are, most important, biggest concerns to you and your family. You lay those out, you knock those out right away, and then you move on to the bigger things. But also a little bit of thinking beforehand instead of just spending your money on survival crap and gear because it says survival on it, or you saw it on, the whatever prepper page thing, whatever. That a lot of that stuff is cool, like some of the cool camping gear and things we talk about. But make sure it's the most important thing for you and your family right now. Because with the economy and inflation and everything, you don't need to be spending money on nonsense. You need to be spending money on stuff that's effective and good. Now, if you can afford the thermal scope for your rifle because you got it like that, then game changer, you should be getting it because that shit's awesome. But it's not necessarily where you need to start. That's not, having enough food in your pantry that you don't have to race to the store and fight people with, slamming shopping carts into each other to make sure that you're able to give your kids dinner for the week. That probably should come first. And putting yourself in credit card debt or whatever, where you're not going to be able to, make the payments and you get kicked out of your house, probably wasn't a good choice for the thermal. Spending your money to buy 2 weeks of food on the credit card and then you get kicked out of your house. Well, at least you got 2 weeks of food. So, I'll give you that, and that bill doesn't come
Yep.
for a while. So, but that's
Mhm.
it. Think about how you prioritize stuff and put a little effort into that, a little foresight in the beginning, and decide what are really, possible problems, practical things you can do to, make it a game changer, to put you ahead.
Right. And like Chuck said, you don't want to have to be at the grocery store fighting other people and ramming people with shopping carts. But if you want to do that, that's okay. I mean, if you want to just do that on your regular shopping trip, I have no problems with that. Just, you don't want to have to be doing that. Now, the last thing I got here is it'd be good to make a list of your prepping goals. Everybody lives in a different type of environment, different type of climate, urban, rural, and you need to have a basic plan on what you want to have ready and what sort of situations you might find yourself in. If I live in Florida, I'm not going to plan for blizzards, If I live in the Midwest, I'm not going to worry about hurricanes. You kind of have to work where you're at and see what the real problems that you might be running into are and plan accordingly. Now, if you have no food, what I would recommend is this. Make a list of 5 or 10 things that you need to do to get more prepared. And then just prioritize and start with the first 3. Start with the first couple on that list, the most important ones, and work on those. Sometimes this sort of stuff, prepping, can be overwhelming. It can seem like you've got a lot to do and not enough time and not enough money to do any of it. But just take it easy. Take it slow and start where you're at and work forwards from there. Like Chuck was saying, if you don't have 2 weeks worth of food stored up, don't go out and buy the thermal scope. It's not worth it yet. That 10% gets you 90% of the way there. Having 2 weeks worth of food and water, that's 90% of the way there. You're almost set. And a lot of preppers that I talk to, a lot of people that I talk to are, they get super crazy about, they have 15, they have 10 or 15 AR-15s and different types of weapons, all sorts of ammunition, but they don't have any food stored up. That shit isn't going to do you a whole lot of fucking good unless your plan is to go to your neighbor's house and rob them. So, think about it before you go out spending all your money on crazy stuff, and make a plan first. Make a plan on what you need. Don't go out there and just see whatever you see is 10% off on the on the prepper homepage and go out and spend $80,000 on food for the next 15 years. And, because it was 10% off, 10% off. And then you're going to realize that food that you ordered is all freeze dried, and it tastes like garbage. Think about what you want and what you need before you go out spending the money. If you want to spend $80,000 on food, that's fine. Do that. But most people, that's a lot of money for most people. And honestly, I think you're probably in the ballpark of $30,000 for getting 5 years worth of food. But whatever it is. That shit can get expensive fast.
Easy go, man. I'll just keep working. That's the way I see it. Now, I know you were kind of excited this week. We kind of got the verdict on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial there.
Yeah, everybody's talking about that. Personally, I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that. I saw a lot of dumb shit on the news. It seemed like the defense was really pretty fucking shitty.
Oh, dude, I'm
garbage.
I'm listening to them. They played some kind of I don't know, clip of the prosecutor. It was right around when they were bashing him for taking the gun. He doesn't even look to see if it's loaded, and he's pointing it at the jury and got his finger in the trigger hold and in the trigger guard there. And he's like, well, somebody checked it before they handed it to me, so I'm good. Pointing it at the jury and his finger on the trigger. But that wasn't even what disturbed me the most, although that's pretty disturbing. I mean, I assume if you hand an imbecile an AR-15 that somebody checked it out. But, who knows?
Right.
But apparently that's not a thing, actually, knowing how to check out a gun. But, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, he probably had the safety on, so I wouldn't even worry about it. Nobody was like, hey, well, did he have the safety on? See, no.
Mm-hmm.
We all know in the gun world that the safety is, between your ears, and you're supposed to not point shit at people and
not point it at people.
That'd be even better.
Yeah,
but whatever. So anyway, this jackass is trying to defend one of the guys who got shot. I don't even know which one or care. But bottom line, he's like, yeah, this guy just left the hospital and he was just going home or whatever. We don't even think that he went to go try and go to this riot and whatever, this protest.
Right.
And, yeah, he pushed over a porta potty, but nobody was in it. And yeah, he pushed over a trailer and set it on fire. But this guy was just out. Like, these are things, they're going to make it sound bad, but is it really bad? And the guy's like mocking, like, going out and pushing over porta potties. Like, who doesn't do that? I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
But thing is, like, I know some jackass people who would do that kind of thing. But to make the argument, yeah, he just happened over there and he just happened to, because that's what people do. I'm like, no, dude, that's not what people do. Like, I don't know what your world is like, but no, I don't just walk over and destroy people's hard work and effort and be like, hey, fuck you and your stuff. Oh, look, you got that nice car. Let me smash the window because, that's funny. No, yeah. I don't really
No, I think I said
funny.
The defense earlier. I meant the prosecution. And, it seemed a little bit crazy how they're trying to paint the guys that got shot as, these simple, honest people that were really just believed in equality and helping their black friends and black neighbors. It's not like they're wife beaters or anything like that, Oh yeah, I guess they are. Turns out they are. But I don't know. The whole thing seems a little bit dumb to me in the sense that, one, this kid didn't live in this area and traveled there on purpose with a gun that he shouldn't have done. Two, his mom took him there. Like, what the fuck? I would never take my kid to that sort of fucking situation. I would never bring my kid there. That seems, part of that has to rest on mom being, just being foolish.
And that's one of the things I see is it's very concerning that, hey, like, I'm not going to grab the AR-15 and go to where a bunch of jackasses are hanging out in town. There's ways to protest and show your, and I don't mean ways to stand out in the street and protest correctly. What I mean is to show the government that you don't approve. There's ways to do that and to let your voice be heard and ways to do things without being a jackass. And there is a time, to pick up arms. But out in the street in front of the Piggly Wiggly, probably not that time. Not like, hey, and I understand you don't want to go, let people destroy your business. And, we have heard stories about people losing their whole livelihood from these riots and things getting destroyed. And that is kind of a big deal. And, stuff does need to be defended, and there is a place for that. But, damn, don't just go out there looking for a fight. That's the answer. Yeah. That's, it's just one of those things. There's a lot of gray, and you can, make points of, well, you got to protect what's right. And if we don't take a stand, we'll lose everything. And there's definitely an argument to be made there. But going out and acting out with a bunch of thugs and whatever is not necessarily, where you want to be. And then plan ahead. If you're going to go do that, safety in numbers. If you're an overwhelming force, then you can kind of, and maybe you can make the argument that's why they brought a 17-year-old, because we were trying to up our numbers and, be a prepared group. But they weren't, because he was all alone. They left him on his own, and it just was bad decision after bad decision that put him in a bad spot. And yeah, you should be allowed to defend yourself. And you know what? To be honest, if he didn't shoot people, they probably would have beat the hell out of him, could have killed him, left him permanently, mentally challenged, whatever. It's just, don't put yourself in that situation. But I'm saying that doesn't mean don't stand up for your rights. Don't protect what you have. I'm saying be smart about it. Be smart about how what you do and the choices that you make.
Yeah.
But
yeah, a lot of people are painting him as a hero. I don't really see that. I think that you're right. He defended himself. He was probably going to get the shit kicked out of him, but he brought himself he put himself in that situation to begin with.
You wouldn't have found me standing there with an AR-15 by myself in the middle of the street. It's not how it is. But like I said, there is a place for protecting your community and your small business, even though right now you might be screaming, well, it wasn't his community. Well, okay. But, we have friends and people we care about. I think his dad lived there or something in that community. Or I don't know. Again, not really focused on the details. I'm focused on be smart when you go out and make choices. Think about where you're going to be, what you're going to do, what the possible scenarios are, how you'd handle it, and are you prepared to deal with the consequences? And, those things matter. Even though he was found not guilty, there were consequences. He paid heavy consequences for his action. Fear, stress, anxiety. Even if he sues, they're talking about he's going to sue the media or, different things. Glenn Beck's like, oh, I'll give him money. We'll go after the people who painted him as whatever. I guess the president's like, yeah, he's a white racist or some stupid shit. I don't know. It's just like, what the fuck? But
I've heard a lot of people saying a lot of stupid shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and I hear, I have to listen at work. Well, people are like, well, why did he have an AR-15 in the street? And he's in a different state and he's only 17. Why the fuck shouldn't a 17-year-old be able to hold an AR-15? Get out of here. Shut up. It's fucking America. But again, why he's, there and whatever, again, it's all nuanced, and there's good and bad points. And, society, we're so quick to judge one another and jump on, our bandwagon and the limited stuff we've heard. I've only heard my limited stuff and you've only heard yours, because we can only deal with so much bullshit before we get overwhelmed and just shut down. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance and stuff in there, but hey, think before you act is all I'm saying. And, honestly, I'm way happier that this kid's life didn't get ruined for, choices that he made right now. To be honest, I'm good with the outcome. But was it bad choices on his part? All day long. And you're naive to defend it like, hey, this was the right thing. Well, I mean, yeah, the outcome of the trial may be the right thing. But was it the right thing for him to be standing around out there like that? Probably not, I'm going to have to go with no, but on the flip side, we can't just roll over and give up the world to people who want to, make noise and be loud about it. People who want to say, well, it's our rights and we can do whatever we want, and we just let them roll over us and we keep cowing down. We used to talk about, earlier on in this podcast about the education system. And, for a long time, people are like, well, I teach my kids at home and it doesn't matter. They learn the principles and values from what they see with us. But you forget that these teachers are like indoctrinating your kids for 8 hours a day, and they have a real influence on the children that they're bringing up. And, to say that there hasn't been an effect from the education system, that they haven't influenced the way people think and act in society over the last 30 years would be pretty naive. We have definitely made some cultural shifts. And I know for a fact that a lot of the decisions and thought processes that I get out of my kids came from school. They approach things a certain way from stuff they were taught in the public schools. And I'm not saying be terrified of the public schools. What I'm saying is we can't just let people roll over us and we back down from everything. You need to go to school board meetings. You need to pay attention. And it's impossible to worry about everything at once. Again, choose 10% of your battles and, focus on that instead of being scattered and all over the place. So you have thoughts, ideas, concerns, things you want to talk to us about, shoot us an email at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Maybe start the conversation in the Prepping Badass group on Facebook. We could definitely, have a debate. And otherwise, stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.
The Survival and Basic Badass podcast is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.